Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the North Kesteven series. This is a large Lincolnshire district centred around the town of Sleaford. There's 75 parishes here, so let's take a look at one of them. Hello everybody out there in North Kesteven, welcome to one of your glorious parishes here in Lincoln for the first time in 2024. Now, I'm standing at the beginning of this one next to a tall pillar. We like tall things on this channel, don't we? Well, look how tall this is. I wonder if you know what this thing actually is. Well, I don't think you would believe me if I told you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You'll find this pillar just off the A15 in the parish of Dunston. The North Kesteven series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Robbery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Dunston, Dunestone. Today in North Kesteven we come to the first of a series of parishes that stretch across the district for more than 8 miles from west to east. There are several of them in this part of Lincolnshire, thin strips of land that touch both the A15 and the western bank of the River Witham. The villages which sit within them are generally quite small, whilst the rest is arable farmland. The first one of these is Dunston, a small village located 7 miles south of Lincoln close to the B1188. Dunston was first mentioned in the Domesday Book as Dunestone, and its name seems to be Saxon, meaning dark stone or dark town. Quite why the Saxons thought this one was bereft of light is a bit beyond me. Whilst it appears sleepy to the outsider, Dunston is a bright, vibrant village with an active community, one that's often brought together in times of crisis. I'm referring there to the localised flooding this place has had recently. As we walk around, we'll see some of the after effects of that. In stretching across the district to touch the river, Dunston also includes the hamlet of Dunston Fen, which has a pub and its own little bit of history to tell. In the other direction is Dunston Heath, which was once lit by a great light. Time for me to turn the TVI spotlight on the village and see what it has to offer. We begin 3 miles to the west of the village at this tall structure that overlooks the A15. This is Dunston Pillar, which was built in 1751. Have you guessed what this once was yet? Well, it's not a memorial or some kind of folly. Believe it or not, this was in fact a lighthouse. It was originally some 92 feet tall, although it's slightly less these days. It had to be lowered by 40 feet in order to prevent any accidents with aircraft coming into land at RAF Colby Grange. At that time, a statue of King George III, which once stood on top of it, was removed. Dunston Pillar was the one and only land lighthouse in the UK, and it was last used in 1808. It was built by Sir Francis Dashwood, the founder of the Knights of St Francis, as a gift to his wife Sarah. Dashwood landscaped the base of the lighthouse with a plantation of trees and a bowling green. It became a popular gathering place for picnics and tea parties, and soon a two-storey dining hall was added. This was dubbed the Vauxhall of Lincolnshire by the vicar of nearby Welbourne. Now, as well as the pillar itself, you've got a couple of houses which are either side of it, but of course they're not part of the main Dunestone village. Of course, we have to travel a little bit to get to that. It's a bit to the east. So let's hop into the car and let's go and see what the village is like. I know Dunestone because I've been to it a few times before. I know it's a lovely little place and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So now we're crossing Dunston Heath. This is part of the much bigger Lincoln Heath, a vast area of flat arable farmland between Lincoln and Sleaford. Dunston Heath is the reason why Dunston Pillar needed to be built. As we already know, Francis Dashwood built it for his wife. But why? Well, back in the 18th century there were no electric street lights and Dunston Heath was very dark. Sarah Dashwood often feared crossing it to get to her home in Nocton, Dunstan's neighbour, and so the lighthouse acted as a safety measure. It also helped other travellers with a safe passage across the heath. So why was the heath so dangerous? Well, in those days, this area was notorious for highwaymen. There are many tales of robbery on the heath, and so the tall lantern acted almost like a modern-day streetlight or floodlight would today. It was regularly lit until 1788 and was used for the last time in 1808, by which time improvements in the local road network had made it effectively obsolete. We begin our walk around Dunston at one of the 3 village greens. There's a main green and 2 smaller ones, and this is one of the latter. Straight away we have landmarks. This house here used to be a pub called the Butcher's Arms, which dates back to the 17th century. It's also one of the modest number of listed buildings here. The house next door used to be one of the 2 post offices in the village. The Butcher's Arms may no longer exist as a pub, but Dunston still has one. In fact, it has 2. Let's head around this corner and find one of them. On the way, we passed one of Dunstan's 3 nonconformist chapels. This one was the Wesleyan Methodist. The others were Primitive and Wesleyan Reform. Here's the pub. This is the Red Lion, a 17th century stone-built village inn and latterly a popular restaurant. You can stay the night here too, thanks to an array of accommodation in the converted farm buildings at the rear, located in its large car park. After the pub, the road becomes Front Street. This is residential for a short way, but soon the largest of the 3 village greens comes into view. Flanking the edge of the green is a small spring-fed watercourse known as Dunston Beck. Now this is pretty and absolutely crystal clear, but it's also never normally this high. The excessive rainfall of late meant here the stream was extremely deep. Part of Fen Lane, the road next to it, was covered in floodwater, forcing it to close. I doubt Dunston has many issues with flooding given its location, but if anywhere in the village is prone to it, well, this would be it. Front Street turns now towards Chapel Lane, but for us next, it's the playing field. Dunston Playing Field is sometimes known as Dolly's Paddock or Dolly's Yard. Now, who Dolly was, I don't know, but I do know that the field is excellent. It has a big playground with facilities for both bowls and football. Dunston also used to have a croquet club that played here too until very recently. They still exist, but in 2023 they moved to the Dyson Farming Cricket Ground in Nocton because it had a better clubhouse and 3 courts. The modern houses that line one edge of the playing field belong to Meadow Road. That's coming up shortly. After crossing the playing field, we're now on Chapel Lane. To the east, this is just a dead-end track with a small collection of houses on it. Otherwise, it's a bendy road which makes its way north back into civilization. If you were to head south, it becomes Dunston Road and goes over a railway bridge before entering the much bigger Metheringham. It's not long before we encounter the chapel that gives the road its name, the primitive Jubilee Chapel, which according to its datestone was enlarged in 1870. It's still active as a Methodist chapel today. Even though Dunston has generally escaped any connections to the high offices of state as opposed to Nocton, it does have some grand houses. There's nothing greatly exciting about Meadow Road, but it's a useful street to be on because it provides us with a link back to Front Street. This part of the road used to mark the edge of the village before new builds like Meadow Road came along. Historically, this was the part of Dunston occupied by those with a bit of capital behind them, and it features the most expensive property yet. Hiding away behind those trees is the 6-bedroom Grade 2 listed Dunston House, a detached period family home dating from 1805. It was a farmhouse originally where members of the Maltby family lived for generations before it was purchased as part of the Smith's Crisps estate. Beyond the house, the road runs back into Chapel Lane again, and here's the Christmas tree, right next to another stretch of Dunston Beck. Given the proximity of the stream, it will come as no surprise to learn Dunston House was originally called Brook Farm. The phone box stands close to the water's edge here. This one has no working phone, but it does have a pretty good book exchange. The local bus service stops here. Dunston is served by 2 of these, the number 31 between Lincoln and Sleaford and the B5 between Lincoln and Boston. Here's the village hall. This features a carving of King George III by Simon Todd in honour of the statue that once topped Dunston Pillar. And the parish notice board isn't far away, as you might expect in this communal area. Tick off Dunston, everyone. The road then bends left, and on the corner is the old school. This was erected in 1852 and was enlarged in 1890 to hold up to 135 children. We've now reached the 3rd green, and this one is the oldest of the lot. As well as the old school, this one is encircled by some of the oldest buildings in the village, including stone cottages that go back several centuries. We're on the corner of Vicarage Lane, meaning the church must be nearby, and it is. This is the entrance to St Peter's, which dominates the centre of the old village. The current St Peter's Church was built between 1874 and 1876 by R.H. Carpenter, and it was mostly paid for by the Marquis of Ripon. There was, however, a church here long before those times. The porch is believed to still have its original Norman arch. Dunston's War Memorial can be found here too, although it's not immediately obvious where it is. It's made of 2 parts, firstly the clock and secondly a tablet on the wall of its tower. The tablet records the names of those who served in World War I, and both were unveiled in 1921. Behind the church is the enormous vicarage, which accounts for why the churchyard is so small. In the 19th century, part of it was annexed into its garden by the local vicar. After the vicarage, the road runs into Back Lane, a curious street with both some very old and much newer properties. I'd describe this as the most eclectic of the streets in the village. Newer properties can also be found off it in the form of Hall's Court. This is a small open-plan cul-de-sac with a couple of handy linkways through to Middle Street. Walking through Hall's Court brings us to the second of the 2 former post offices before a left turn takes us up a footpath. This forms part of the Spires and Steeples Arts and Heritage Trail, which passes through North Kesteven from Lincoln Cathedral to St Denny's Church in Sleaford. Here in Dunston, it passes the modern primary school on Back Lane, which replaced the old one we saw earlier. And that's really it in a nutshell. After the school, the road bends to the right to bring us back to the small green where we began. A lovely walk, that one. You know, it's villages like this one, Dunston, which I love the most because they're all clustered and they're very easy to make a route for. It's taken me less than an hour and I followed the route to the letter. Lovely place. I told you it was. I'm not in the habit of lying to people. Now, there's one more thing I need to cover in this episode. You see, all these parishes which are to the eastern side of North Kesteven are all very long and thin. They stretch from the heaths in the west to the River Witham in the east. So now we're going to drive down to the River Witham because there's another settlement down there, well, sort of a settlement, that's got a pub. Let's go and check it out. Here's just how big Dunston Parish is. As we know already, Dunston Pillar is located 3 miles to the west of the village. The hamlet we're heading for now is 5 miles to the east, located on the bank of the River Witham in an area known as the North Kesteven Fens. In much the same way as the heath, the North Kesteven Fens are flat, but they're much more low-lying. There are several fens all side by side. Dunston Fen is bordered to the north by Nocton Fen and to the south by Metheringham Fen. These were all marshes at one time, and all of this land has been reclaimed for arable farming. They're so flat that if you were to stop and get out of the car, you would almost be convinced that the earth was flat. The Witham is 12 minutes away from Dunston if you're driving, but a walk to the river from the village would take you over an hour. The roads out here are all dead straight, but narrow and extremely bumpy. These are known as droves, and they were never really designed for modern traffic. Droves were mainly for moving cattle and livestock to and from the farmland's lush grazing areas, depending on the season. However, here, these had a different purpose. We're actually driving on the route of an old railway line, one that used to transport potatoes. After the bumpy 5-mile trek to the east along it, we're at the Witham. Look carefully here. You might recognise something familiar on the opposite bank. Okay, so here we are then at the White Horse pub, which you can see here. There it is. And the caravan park that's next to it, right there. And then obviously you've got the River Witham just here. Now we can go down to the Witham via these steps, although I'm not going to go all the way down because, as you can see, the Witham is very high at the moment. So I'm just going to go as far as there, a little jetty there. There used to be a ferry across the river here at one time, and on the other side of the river you can see as well Southery Station. Do you remember Southery in the Bardney episode of West Lindsey? That is exactly where we are. It's on the other side of the Witham from that. I'm sure you remember that if you watched the Bardney episode. If not, go and have a look after you've watched this one. So there you go, that is Dunston Fen. There's a bit of history here as well. There's a board which tells you about some things that happened on the river. There you go, a wagon load of spuds. The wind noise here was atrocious, so you can't hear what I'm saying. Luckily, you can still read the information board, but I'll explain what this says too. It's about the railway line, which was part of a system that ran to almost 30 miles in length across the fens. The track was bought second-hand in 1926 from an army surplus depot in France. It had originally been destined to carry supplies to the World War trenches of the Somme. Instead, it became an efficient way of transporting potatoes from the muddy, waterlogged fen fields during the autumn lifting season. There's more on this though next week. And folks, that's it for another parish in North Kesteven. Now, as I said at the top of this one, there are several that stretch for miles across this part of the district, and next week's is no exception. Join me there as we take a look at a place that's got strong links to the RAF, despite having no airfield. I'll see you there in 7 days' time. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.